In this video, we're going to take a look at adding ceilings to our model. This is a very easy tool to use. We'll begin by adding some additional rooms in which we can put ceilings. So we're going to select the wall tool and then select our common interior wall. We'll add one room here in the corner. Hit escape a couple times, switch to the door tool. We'll add a single 3-foot by 7-foot door so that we have access to that room. We'll switch to the level 2 plan and we'll go ahead and add a wall around our mechanical chase opening that we added. Make some offices along the edge here. So here I didn't click far enough, so I'm going to just select the wall and drag that grip a little further. Here I'm going to use the align tool to make those line up. Maybe we actually want this to be a little bit more to the right, so I'm using the arrow keys and the alignment relationship. The joined walls kind of got messed up, so I have to do the align tool again. Now we'll select the wall tool and add a couple of intermediate walls here. And then we'll quickly throw in a couple of doors. So now that we have some rooms in which to put ceilings, we will switch to our ceiling plan view. We could go into VV and turn off the roof, but once we place ceilings, those 3D elements will cover most of this line work. Then we'll just be left with the overhangs on the outside of the building, which in some cases you may want to actually add notes saying what the overhang material is, or add some construction notes. So on the Architecture tab, we're going to select the Ceiling tool. Like most commands, we have the ability then to select which type we want to add. So what ceiling type are we going to construct? So we're going to pick a 2x2 for these smaller spaces. Notice that the height above the floor is listed. And then at this point, we simply click within the spaces and Revit automatically detects the boundary. It's looking at the 8-foot level or whatever the above floor level is for a boundary. So if you have bulkheads or soffits that are at that 8-foot level, it'll wrap around them rather than the perimeter of the room. So we'll switch to 2x4 so we can add a larger tile in this larger room. Now we'll go to our 3D view, select one of these walls. Maybe we'll go ahead and use our temporary height isolate so we can see what's going on here a little better. So we see our ceiling. Maybe in the large space we actually want that ceiling to be a little higher. What's nice in Revit is anywhere you can select the element, you see its properties. So in this 3D view we can actually select the ceiling and then type 9 foot and see the ceiling go up. If we go back to the ceiling plan view, notice how when we try to select the ceiling, it actually selects one of the grid lines. By default, the pattern is set to fit or be centered, I should say, in a room. We can actually use the move command and adjust that ceiling location by typing in dimensions. Normally you want more than half a tile around the perimeter if possible. So initially it was the right size, so we'll just go ahead and move it back. We can also, while we have that grid selected, we could use the rotate command. Maybe we want the tile actually to go the other direction. By default, the longer tile direction matches the longer length of the room, which is normally what is desired. We can also select the grid and use the arrow keys. Normally you'd want to be a little more precise than that, but the arrow keys work in many instances. So selecting a ceiling that has a grid, the default is it wants to select the grid rather than the ceiling itself. just like floors, you have to select a ceiling at its edge to be able to actually select it. Or you could go to your 3D view and you still have to select it at the edge, but here it's a little easier because it's not, because we hit a wall, it's not buried in the wall. And having the ceiling selected, you could then hit the delete key and delete the ceiling, but you can't delete the ceiling just by selecting one of the grid lines. On the first floor, in our small room in the lower left here, we're going to add a hard ceiling. One of the options in the template we started with is gypsum wallboard on metal stud. Notice again it's at 8 feet, and we click. We don't see anything initially. We go to our 3D view, but we can see that there is a ceiling there. The reason we don't see anything is because there's no stipple or fill pattern assigned to that face in projection. So if we drag a crossing window from right to left, again in the lower right we can see there are two elements selected. I click the funnel, which opens up the filter dialog box. Uncheck walls. Now we only have a ceiling selected. We notice that it's listed here in the type selector again. I can click edit type, edit structure, and then for the bottom side of the ceiling, which is seen in the room, this finish layer, the 5/8" gypsum board, we can edit the material. That's selected by default. We notice over here in the material editor. By the way, if your material editor didn't open automatically, you can open it by clicking this little icon in the lower right here. But for the surface pattern, we want to select something like gypsum plaster for the surface pattern. Then we won't click done, otherwise this material editor won't open again, so we'll just click OK. And now we see a fill pattern. We'll place one more ceiling. This time we'll do the 2x4 ceiling again. And we'll click in this larger room here on the first floor. And if we go to our 3D view, we notice we created a problem similar to what we did when we initially drew our second floor element. Our ceiling went right through the stair. So if we go back to our level 1 ceiling plan, we need to select this stair. I'm going to just put my cursor near the edge of the room and then press tab. I'm tapping it, not holding it down, until I see the perimeter of the ceiling highlight. And now when I click, it actually selects the ceiling. So even though the ceiling automatically found the boundary of the space, we can actually edit that. So I click Edit Boundary, and then I'm going to use this line tool. So I can create a hole here. I'm going to trim these lines, select OK. Now of course we'd have to come back and draw in a bulkhead around that opening. We can go ahead and do that real quick. We'll go back to our level 1 ceiling plan, select the wall tool. We can use that same 4 7/8" wall. We'll set the bottom of that wall to be, let's say, 7'10", and then it can still go up to level 2. And our finish face can be finish face interior. And now when we go to our 3D view, we can see we added a wall. So I'd probably want to go back in and edit the ceiling to actually stop on the other side of this bulkhead. But on the Modify tab, another thing we can do is use the Join tool, like the floor in the bulkhead. The floor. So I selected the ceiling where it was easy to select in that 3D view, and then pressed Control Tab on the keyboard to cycle through my open views. Now I can click Edit Boundary. Then I can actually just drag this line and it'll snap to the other side of the wall. Another thing we can do while we're in this 3D view is switch to consistent colors. If we do not want these walls to be gray, we can change what the material is for it. So we select the wall, go to Edit Type, Edit Structure, and then the finish is the material for the finish on both sides of the wall is the same. So we can edit that material. Click this button to open the material editor. And then for the shading color, I'll just change that to be white instead of gray. Now all our walls are a little brighter, a little easier to see. Next we'll look at how we can tag the ceilings. So if we actually just right on the quick access toolbar, we can select tag by category, and it says there's no tag loaded for the ceilings. Do you want to load one? We'll select yes, go into the annotation category, architectural, and then we actually have a ceiling tag with height option. So not only will this list the material, it'll list the height of the ceiling. For these tags we probably want to turn off leader, so that it'll put the tag right at the center of the ceiling. Switch to level 2 and you can see how the ceiling type and the height is listed. We can move that around. Initially it's just going to put it in the center. Another option we have if we want to know the height of the ceiling and don't really need a tag and maybe are having a hard time selecting it, we can use the spot elevation tool on the annotate tab. When we select that, we can see the elevation. This is above level 1, but we can actually change that so that it's relative to the current level that we're on. So we scroll down here to the elevation origin and we'll make it relative. So now it's relative to the floor level that we're working off of, which this level 2 ceiling plan is relative to level 2. We could just move it around and hit escape. Maybe we don't need to add a spot elevation. If this were a sloped ceiling, we'd see the value change as we moved the spot elevation around. I'm going to hit escape, and that's a quick look at adding ceilings in Revit.